All right, it's recording.
Great. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another Empathy Circle. You can find us in the Facebook group, Bridging Political Divides with Empathy Circles. And today's topic, I believe we wanted to discuss individualism versus collectivism, or whatever else is on your mind, of course, whatever's alive for you today. Totally fine to discuss whatever you want. And an empathy circle is a structured process where we basically take turns selecting who we want to talk to, and the listener simply reflects back what they're hearing without putting any of their own opinion into it, just simply reflecting back as accurately as possible what you heard the other person say. And then we go around and around until the circle closes, and then we'll come back with some feedback about how we feel it went, and that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions? Have we all done this before? Cool. So why don't we get started, and I guess David and I can start off just to model one.
Shouldn't everyone, I think we know each other, but shouldn't we do introductions?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, let's go around and introduce ourselves. So I am Evan Mcore. I grew up in Long Island. I've always identified as a liberal, but I've kind of just been more studying a different communication method that's more of a needs-based approach and just looking at everyone's needs. And we all have different needs, so just trying to figure out how everyone's needs can be met. And I'll pick people out based on my screen order. So David.
Hello, my name's David, and I currently live in San Francisco. I grew up in Alabama, so that's I grew up in the most conservative part of the country, and I spent most of my adult life in the most liberal part of the country. I think I've been exposed to both extremes fairly well. For all intents and purposes, I relate with the right, and yeah, I got lots of views on different stuff, so it's kind of hard to sum it up.
Okay, Karolina, and let me know if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, it's good. I'm sorry if I'm muted. No.
No, you're good.
My name is Karolina Kubiak. I live in Poland, in Central Europe. Yeah, you pronounced my name correctly. Thank you. My political point of view, my political perspective is, I would, in short, radical left wing with Gandhian means. That's in short. The background is quite socialist, anarchist, that kind of. But I choose Gandhian methods, Gandhian means.
Okay, great. Thanks. Bill?
My name is Bill Filler. I'm a retired special education teacher in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, on the West Coast. In short, I'm on the left, but it's complicated. I like what Karolina said.
Okay, Megan?
All right, my name is Megan. I live in Chico, California, and traditionally have identified as anarchist, radical, like trying to get to the roots of things, but also for a long time have been studying a needs-based approach, and so wanting all humans to have their needs met and looking for win-wins.
I'm having a little trouble hearing Megan. Is anyone?
The same me.
Can you hear me back?
A little broken up and garbled.
I barely understand what you're saying. Actually,
can you hear me better?
I was able to make out what you're saying.
I can hear you now. You probably don't want to be so close. Maybe just project your voice when you're talking, since you're on a phone, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, but I've done it before this way and it worked fine. So I'm not sure what the problem is today.
Oh, I can hear you fine now. Maybe
I
it's
can hear you.
Okay.
All right. Well, we have a lot of experienced people here. So does anyone want to go first?
I think you should.
All right. I will select Bill.
I'm listening. Thank you.
All right. So when we were talking about the topics and we picked individualism versus collectivism for today, I always think of Japan as the first thing that pops into my mind, because it's often like the poster boy for examples between like the US, which is very individualist, and Japan, which is super like all the way on the other side of the spectrum. You compare cultures, and the discussion always seems to be, you know what? I'll pause there.
Okay. So you're using as sort of an icon or symbols of the collectivism, which would be Japan versus the United States, which they call the star system, kind of like very individualistic. So those you see as two extremes of that individual versus collective.
Yeah, and people always say like, oh well, Japan, sure they have like pretty much like the lowest crime, one of the lowest crime rates in the world, and everything operates very smoothly there. And then people always say that, oh, but they have like a really high suicide rate, so it's not like it's all perfect. It might look perfect on the outside, but it's, that statistic is very glaring and kind of scary.
Okay. So in Japan, as an example of that kind of society, they have the lowest crime rate, and everything works very smoothly and harmoniously. But they also have a very high suicide rate. So there's something going on there under the sheets that we can't see.
Yeah, and then when you look at our culture,
Mm-hmm.
people, it's kind of like it doesn't have the greatest reputation from what I've seen in the world, like American culture. It's, very materialist. So something that I thought about to bring to this conversation was there was this documentary I was watching about a cult on Netflix. I'm sure someone else can. Wild Wild Country, and it was a philosopher that everyone followed, and one of his things was that he said he wanted to combine sort of the cultures of the East and the West and sort of bring materialism and then spiritualism together. He said like you kind of need both to really have everything that a society might want. People want things, and they also need, spiritualism to feel fulfilled. That there should be drive and fulfillment sort of working in tandem. And I thought that was actually a really good thing, even though I would never join a cult. I mean, I think that's a beautiful idea.
Okay. So then the contrast, we were talking about the American system, and that doesn't seem to get much respect around the world. It's very materialistic. And then you were reflecting on a Netflix film you saw, Wild Country, in which this cult leader is talking about how you have to merge the materialistic and the spiritualistic, and that they're not necessarily antagonistic, but they should be made to work harmoniously.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay.
David, you're muted, but yeah, we can, does anyone want to volunteer to keep time?
Sure, I have my phone here, sure.
Okay.
Let me just put that on. And what are we saying, 5 minutes?
Sounds good.
All right, 5 minutes. All right. Yeah. All right, Karolina? Will you?
Okay, I can try, but please, I am not native speaker in English. I still learn English, so please be merciful for me.
Okay, I will try to be merciful. Just put up your hand and stop me if you need.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, I agree. As far as that, I don't know what the cult, but I agree that the collective should enhance the individual, and the individual should work for the collective. And okay.
So, first thing you want to admit is that both collectiveness and individuality should be put together, and individualism have inside of it a kind of collectiveness, and especially collectiveness has to include individualism. Is it correct?
Yes, thank you. And we see this in nature, in the interdependence of animals. You have something, let's just say a cactus and a specific bat, and they would neither would exist without each other. Are those two different things, or you know, that the bat needs the cactus just like your heart needs oxygen or your lungs need oxygen?
Okay, let me try to reflect.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that you perceive this dependence, both features like collectiveness and individualism in nature as, can I use word inherent feature of nature? It is,
yes, yes.
of nature, like something the nature, any species can't exist without. It's like an oxygen for us. Okay, to live we need oxygen, and we need those two features together. That's what you perceive in nature.
Yes, I see it in nature, and I feel that that's almost like a law of nature, this interdependence. And I see that doing the listening circles is a way that we can overcome our resistance to what we think is the other.
So you say, well, I understand everything, but I kind of forgot what you say before.
I'll repeat it if you want, sure.
Can you repeat the first thought?
Well, I'm saying that that the main point here is that the purpose of the listening circle is to overcome what our resistance to what we think when I talk to you as the other, yet we are very interdependent.
So you think that this interdependence feature that you see in nature should be implemented back into society, into communication between us.
Right.
And you see the empathy circle as the method of doing it. Is it correct?
Yeah, thank you, Karolina. I feel fully heard. That was great.
Okay, thank you. So whom can I choose? Well, maybe David. Can you reflect me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Well, I hope we will manage to run. So in the first round, I want to talk about some practical example of collectiveness in my country, which is the political party I am the member.
Okay, you said you would like to give an example of a practical use of collectivism in regard by talking about the political party that you are affiliated affiliate.
Okay.
Some words I woke up that you're connected to in Poland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am a member. Well, actually, I suspended the membership of this party because I disagree with some political strategy, but I still financially support the party that is name is Razem, what means in English together. And it's left-wing party. And the interesting thing of this party is that we don't have a single individual that is a leader of this party. There is collective leadership and collective governing the whole party.
Okay. You said that this party that you're affiliated with, though you're not affiliated with, you're less affiliated with them today because of some political strategies, but you still support them financially.
Yeah.
But you said that the name was Razum or something, which
Razem means together.
It means together in English, and and that it doesn't have a single leader. It has a collective leadership for the most part.
Yes. So we have some, let's say, statutory bodies that make decisions, and they make them collectively. We have something I would translate as a collective, as let's say, a national board, which is kind of executive body, and we have national council that put together about 50 representatives of all the region of our country, and they make together decisions. They discuss them. We have some task groups that operate them. Okay.
Hold up. Okay, so you said that your party has a collective leadership, and it has the national board, which is responsible for the body. And you mentioned another branch, but it escapes me.
A national council, something like country council or national council.
National, and what did they do again?
50 members of this council are representatives of all the regions in Poland, or regional groups, party groups, I mean.
So the council represents different regions of the entire body.
Yeah. And they deliberate all the solutions, all the decisions, all the program points through task groups, through discussion, through kind of working out what we want to do. It's quite a long process, but we managed to do that. We also have kind of system of electronic voting. So I don't have to participate in a yearly congress of the party because for example, I don't have money for traveling or something, but I can vote and elect my representative through the electronic system. We have a lot of IT engineers, so it's easy to us to organize that.
So you said that these two bodies, I'm not sure if you meant the two bodies or the two, or the one, pretty much sets up the different groups that figure out like how things are run, basically, and that you have an electronic voting system in which you can elect your own representatives without having to go to like the building itself and vote in person.
Yeah. So this is, for me, a great example, and I would say a social experiment, because there are a few thousand of us in Poland who are members of this party, and we together, thanks to IT technology, I'm wrapping up, thanks to IT technology, make kind of collective decision.
Okay.
But actually it fails, and I would like to talk about it in the next round, why it fails, where it fails.
Okay, you said that this party, which is a few thousand members, is able to exist today due to technology because you're able to connect with each other instantaneously and vote on stuff. So, and I forgot, what was that last part? You said something that you...
I mean, there are situations where it fails.
There's situations where it fails, and you
Yeah.
would like to talk about that the next go around.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to keep the spirit of rotation going. I'm going to talk to Megan.
Okay.
I'd like to kind of bounce off what Evan was saying about the extreme examples between the U.S. and Japan as far as like a more individualist society versus a more collectivist society.
Okay, so you'd like to share some thoughts, continuing with what Evan said about comparing Japan and the U.S. as examples of collectivist and individualist societies.
Okay, yeah. And I think for a more collectivist society to exist, it helps if the society it is more racially homogenous, like religiously homogenous. It helps when more people have things in common for them to be a collective. So I think that system is going to be very hard to work in the U.S. ever, because we are, pretty much a multicultural society. So we have to have more of an individualist type system, because there's so many different sects in this country and factions.
Okay, so it seems to you that for a collectivist society to work, there needs to be more homogeneity, maybe racially, religious-wise, beliefs.
I didn't say it needs to, but for it to exist, and
What?
the reason Japan is able to pull that off is because of that, and we need to.
So the reason Japan is able to function as a more collectivist society is because there's more homogeneity, and that because the United States is so diverse that, like, collectivism just can't really work as well here, and that because it's multicultural.
Yes, like I think just as social experiments are concerned, like the main collectivist experiment was communism in the Soviet Union. And I'm no historian, but from what I understood, the Bolsheviks really kind of wanted to destroy or downplay like people's connection to religion and family, because they wanted more devotion to the state, so there'd be less obstacles between the people to work as one.
So another example that you think of about collectivism and what it might take for it to work is communist societies that have really tried to break people's connections with religion or with family so that their devotion is to the state.
Yes. And I would like to think, maybe it's just because I'm raised American and I'm, individualist by nature. I don't know if it's by nature, by nurture, but that any kind of like pure collectivist society that tries to exist now, you're going to have people that are going to try to tear that apart, because it's human nature to try to be different from one another.
So you said that you would like to think, or you do think, perhaps based on being raised in the United States, that any purely collectivist society that tries to exist there's people who are going to try to destroy that or upset it, because I think because you said like this other aspect of humanity, of just being individuals.
Want to be an individual, I think, or fight against that. And that's part of the reason why I'm so unapologetically right-wing in San Francisco, is because I found the what I like to call the collective or hive mind here to be a little bit creepy, so I actually get a little bit of a high of being a voice of dissent. And I think that's always going to be an issue with any kind of forced conformity, so to speak.
Your voice just got quieter for some reason, but I think I heard you. You said that you think that's partly why you still consider yourself like right wing is because you live in San Francisco, where a lot of people seem to favor more collectivist political ideology, and that you like being the voice of dissent.
Yeah, well, yes, and they're all left leaning, so it's just like, they feel the need to be a devil's advocate, so to speak. I think that's the job of an artist, so to speak. My time's up.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time? Because I think the alarm went off and I didn't hear you as well.
My last phrase. Yeah, I feel a need to set myself apart in any kind of like one-sided view of stuff. So I'm in San Francisco, so I'm gonna lean more right wing just to be a voice of dissent.
Yeah, you feel the need to set yourself apart from if something is just becoming too
one-sided,
and so that's why you want to, or that's why you feel drawn to like being a voice of dissent as the right winger in San Francisco.
As not the sole one, but a big part of it, and I feel heard. Thank you.
It's the only reason, but it's part of it. Okay. All right. I'll talk to Evan.
All right, I'm listening.
So one thing that it kind of gets my goat to have the discussion framed as individualism versus collectivism, because I think either it doesn't make sense. Like, it actually kind of like really aggravates me that humans seem to fall into this binary either or thinking, and that it has to be one or the other. And I also think it's kind of a false dilemma. I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, so you're saying it gets your goat to frame the discussion as, one versus the other, that it's either or, this sort of binary thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's kind of, I was saying like it's kind of a false dilemma, like, or people get like shoehorned into these extreme positions of like one or the other, when I think that really most humans want kind of a mix of just being able to be their own person, but also being part of a healthy human community.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that word, the false dilemma before, and the phrase, and you actually think most humans want to be individuals, but at the same time be part of a healthy collective.
Yeah. And it's something that frustrates me about the discourse around critiquing communism, which I would not say that I am a communist. I actually usually feel pretty annoyed by the people I encounter who are part of communist or socialist parties. And the reason that I'm annoyed with them is that, well, one of the reasons is that I see all the like communist governments of the 20th century as like social experiments that we can learn from. But this is kind of complicated, but I think it won't be that hard to reflect. Actually, it's pretty simple in a way. I'm going to just say a little more. That it's like, again, there's this false dilemma where the people who are really pro-capitalist are like, oh, this is why communism is terrible. And then the people who are just uncritically for communism or socialism just double down and defend and won't acknowledge critiques of like Cuba or other communist societies that, maybe have even a lot more problems. But whereas what I would like is to look at the successes and how can we, support successes like, for example, healthcare and literacy in Cuba without repeating the mistakes. And I think it's really hard, but it just seems like both sides are throwing one side's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and the other side is, I don't know. I'll stop there.
Sure. So you're saying how you're frustrated with the discourse around communism versus capitalism, and how, one side, is like just taking the worst examples, and then the other side is, people that are pro-communism aren't really listening to the other side either, and you want to just look at the successes.
Or like they aren't really like the people, there's a lot of people who are just uncritically like deifying people like Che Guevara and won't acknowledge any criticism. And people get, again, locked into these all or nothing positions instead of saying, wow, I admire that this person contributed to, for example, with Che Guevara, like, I can admire that, like, there's certain things that were achieved, like more racial equality there and other issues but still have criticisms too of like how homosexual people have been treated in Cuba and other issues. Like, it's okay to like some things and not like others. And it seems like in this debate, usually that's missed. Like, it's just so all or nothing.
Okay, right. So you're saying how both sides get shoehorned into these all or nothing sides, and the pro-communist won't acknowledge criticism. And that you were saying before how you want to look at the successes of communism and just take those pieces like healthcare and literacy in Cuba. And just so you know, I think Bill was holding up his phone a second ago. So does that?
Yeah, that captures it. There is more I want to say, but I'll wait till my next turn. Thank you.
Sure.
I would like to make a motion to maybe add 1 more minute on the timer, maybe. What do you guys feel about that?
Motion passed. Is this a democracy, communist decision? How are we doing this? Just kidding.
As we go.
Okay. I'll select Karolina.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah. So I guess I'll bounce off of kind of what David and Megan were saying. Well, first, what David was saying about communism working better when everyone's homogenous. I thought that was really interesting.
Let me reflect.
Sure.
So you want to kind of resonate or not resonate with what David and Megan said before, and you think that idea of that David expressed, that collectiveness requires kind of homogeneous thinking or homogeneous culture, is worth of talking about.
Yeah, and I think what kind of me and Bill and Megan have been saying is that, it would be nice to have this sort of like combination of both sides, individualism and collectivism. So we're not looking to, so those opinions, I think we're not looking to become Japan. We're not looking to go to the other extreme, whether it requires, everyone to be homogenous or not. I think it's just sort of how do we capture, like Megan was saying, how do we capture the the small successes.
So what I'm hearing, you say that you like the idea of this interdependence of both sides, individualism and collectiveness, and putting them together, working together for the society that doesn't require homogeneous culture, let live together diversity of people. This is correct.
Yeah, I guess I think what we're all saying is that we don't want the extreme. So I'm not worried about trying to become Japan.
Well, you don't want to put the society, for example, the society you live in, into extreme that is like you perceive Japan society.
Right. So my next question in my brain is like, what does that look like? How do we introduce collectivism to America, let's say, practically?
So you put the question, how to do that? How actually to implement this collectiveness into American society? How to make it working?
And I think that there are values and principles that all races, all religions agree on. There's, basic things like, being a good Samaritan that I think could be introduced from a governmental standpoint.
May I?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you see what I hear. You see the kind of common factor or common ground in different religions, different ethnicity. In this diversity, you see a common ground, like some moral values or ethics. You mentioned the Samaritan attitude. So yes, you perceive it as something that exists in any religion, any culture, and it might be a common ground for finding the collectiveness working, that makes collectiveness working.
Yeah, it could be introduced in schools, to try and help people work together from a young age. And then, sorry, I'll pause there because I'm going to go to a separate thought.
Okay, so you think that the practice of collectiveness, however it look like it should be done, should be put into school, into education system, so students can practice it from the young age. That's what you mean?
Mm-hmm. And then I also want to just mention one more thought about what you were saying, which about collective decision making. Collective decision making, I've done it before. I've tried it in a community setting, just like for a house. And oh my God, too many meetings and they take too long. I would rather just let someone else make the decisions. Just tell them, roughly what I want, but you figure out the details.
So you refer to what I said before, and to this, you refer to collective decision making, and you think that it costs a lot of time to make decisions, a lot of point of view, and working on them, and it has a lot of time, and sometimes you prefer to that somebody will make decision, and that's it will be much easier.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, maybe I'll try with Bill. I'm sorry, Meg. I'm afraid to choose you because I have a horrible problem with hearing you. So I'm sorry, because of my language problems, it's easier to choose somebody with whom I hear properly. Okay, I want to continue my thoughts I start in first round. I said that sometimes this collective decision making fails, and it's actually what Evan said. The problem is time and variety of viewpoints. And I give you another example. It's a real situation. 2 years ago, we were voting and electing those statutory bodies through internet. And we have to choose 50 members body from 600 candidates. 600, 600 candidates. Can try to do that. Try to read all the profiles of candidates and choose wisely.
Okay.
It's impossible to do that. Well, you may try to do that, and maybe most of us can do that once, but you can't make such decision in collective all the time, every day, every week, every month. We simply don't have time for it. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking too long.
That's fine. No. Well, so you were talking about the problems. You were following up with what you said earlier, and also reflecting on what Evan said, as far as that when you make all these decisions collectively, it just eats up time exponentially. And then the example you gave was the where you're trying to pick, I don't know whether it was 5-0 or 1-5 candidates out of a field of 600. So to try to read all 600 profiles and then make a decision is very unwieldy, and you really can't do it for all the decisions.
Yeah, and I think that the main factor, main problem is time, and it's kind of civilization problem. It's not just the problem I faced in my party. It's kind of general problem in a society. The same problem we have voting for candidates, for president, for our Congress or Parliament in Poland, or Congress in America, in the United States. You have no time to read everything. You have no time to get familiar with every program. There is not just two president candidates in United States. You have tens or even hundreds of candidates you don't know. You don't hear about them because it's impossible to learn about all of them and to make wise decision whom you choose. The same happens in Poland.
So you were saying that the sheer amount of information and candidates and things like that is mind-crushingly and works against democracy in a way because people don't get the information. It's just too much. They can't do it. And so therefore they don't make necessarily the wisest decision. You also, this is the same in Poland and the United States, this dynamic.
And in any country that has so-called democratic system, okay? That's what democracy is. We try to make collectively decisions. And it fails this way because we can't make rational decision. We make rather emotional decision. That's how democracy become, as a collective form of making decisions, become kind of emotional, populistic way of making decisions. That's how I perceive it.
Right. So in this sort of tide flood of data that's overwhelming, we retreat from intellectually trying to understand it into our emotions. And so then we make an emotional decision based upon our quote unquote gut, and therefore don't always, are not making fully formed the best decisions all the time.
So I like the idea of interdependence, individuality, and collectiveness. And actually, I believe that homogeneous, if collectiveness is about homogeneous society or community or whatever it is, we would call it homogeneous or monolithic or, I don't know, only right or anything that is mono. Okay, we don't call it. We call it collectiveness. That requires individuals, many. That requires variety. So, to create such a collective community or society, I hear that. Thank you. I'm wrapping up. We need to create different civilization, different culture that let us make decisions wisely, communicate and deliberate.
So what you're seeing is that collectiveness is not necessarily, it was a little unclear, but it's not necessarily homogeneous, and that
it's not at all. It's not at all homogeneous.
So collectivism is not at all homogeneous. So as I understand, then the point, if I understand it, is that in order to make a harmonious or functional society, you have to accept differences, and then once you accept differences, people feel accepted, and then they can make more rational decisions. Is that correct?
Not exactly. I would say that collectiveness inherit individualism. It's a part of collectiveness, as well as you said. I understand that as well as you said, but I also mean that we need to build different civilization, different culture. We kind of make a paradigm shift to make collectiveness possible.
Right. So in order to make collectiveness, which I'm interpreting is that you mean is unified fact-based decisions together, we need to have a new departure as to how we organize and how we look at this individual, a new departure for society.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, sure. All right. All right, David, I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Ready? All right. Oh, all right. Then I see that. Oh, so very interesting. When we talk about these things functionally in society, I think about my time as a special education teacher, because I had very, very different individuals. I've had racists and people, militant left wings. I've had a kid with 130 IQ, a kid with 80 IQ, which is functional, low end. And so I had to think about how to create a little mini society, and I'll stop there for right now.
So you find this conversation interesting on many different levels, and you relate your experience as a teacher dealing with lots of different individuals with different capacities of intelligence and viewpoints. And you've had experience creating a little micro society yourself.
Right. And in order to make a functional, and remember that these students were predisposed towards disruption. So just to get that down, you had to establish safety. Then but at the same time, you had to listen to them. You had to, so essentially what we're trying to do is to make the kid or the student value that we value their words. We won't let them hurt anybody, and we'll stop you doing that. But we value words, and when you use your words, you get power. I'll stop right there.
Okay, you started out to say that the kids that you were dealing with were naturally disruptive, so to speak, and or
not in the DSM-6, but yeah, we'll go with it.
Okay, and see here, and that you found one of the things that helps create stability is to promote the idea of of safety. You know, first comes safety, and that, but you also wanted to impress upon them that you valued their opinion as well. So they weren't allowed to cause take away the safety from other people, but also value their words whenever they did express themselves to you, I'm assuming.
Right. And that creates growth. And by the end of the year, physical disruptions and things like that would be down like 80%.
And and I kind of missed the first part. I think you said that promoted growth. Is that the word you?
Yes, when people feel that they're going to be heard and that they can gain power through their words, then they think, oh, and that's growth. Yes.
So you felt like this prioritizing of safety and empathy, listening to them, promoted growth. And
right, and that promoted growth, and that was a basic dynamic. When we talk about, and also I want to talk about how labels keep us apart. So one of the things was, I'm on the left, but all day I talked about respect for authority. So if the people on the right want to have they had their revenge on me. And so I would talk about that, but then I would follow that up with listening. Okay, you can't throw the chair, but what were you feeling, and what can we do to solve that problem another way?
Okay, you said you're not a fan of labels, and one example of that is you identify with being on the left. On the note, you have a healthy respect for rules and authority, and so basically what that translates as is that you want to hear from people, you just don't want them to throw chairs at you or someone else.
I like that. Yeah, and I think that when we talk about, I like what Megan said about communism. Like, for instance, the Bolsheviks were extreme, but first there were the Mensheviks, which were actually the people who were actually much more moderate. And the Bolsheviks came to power when a combined white army backing the Russians came in and radicalized the Bolsheviks, because they were the more radical. So, and it's all been a big mess since then. I'll stop there.
So you were saying you appreciated some of Megan's comments about communism, and from what you know about the birth of communism in the Soviet Union.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
There was the Bolsheviks, and there's also I forgot.
Mensheviks.
Mensheviks.
Right.
News to me. And the Mensheviks were more moderate, and the Bolsheviks were more radical. And due to some outside influence, I think you said the Bolsheviks gained power, and I'm assuming because they're more radical, they probably just overpowered the other group.
No, what happened was, yeah, I'll finish up by just the rest of Europe was afraid of communism, and so they had actually an invasion force called the White Russian Force that tried to prop up the Tsar. And so, the Bolsheviks all had to say, look, these people hate us, you got to fight. And so therefore, radicalism ruled the day.
So you essentially said that radicalism ruled the day
Mhm.
due to
Being invaded, essentially.
being invaded. The Bolsheviks were able to inspire fear and radicalism, and they were able to seize power.
Yeah, sort of, but that's okay. Thank you,
No.
David. That was really, I really appreciate it. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll talk to Megan.
What's the name?
Yes, I'd like to start out to say I don't claim to be a historian. I'm still learning a lot. I have very limited education, but I like to think I understand human nature. So I think I'm able to shift through the wheat and chaff, so to speak, of what's probably true and what's not. So I just like to put that out there. But I do have theories and what I've heard. Things I generally hold on to things that make sense.
So you want to say that you don't have a strong background in history, but that you feel like you have a good grasp on human nature, and that that's what you rely on to make sense of things.
Yes, and from what I've noticed in micro and macro situations, is that it doesn't matter what kind of system you put in place, leaders generally emerge from them.
So one thing that you've noticed is that no matter what system exists on a small or large scale, that there are leaders that emerge.
Yes, I think one reason why socialism/communism is problematic in practice is it might look good on paper, but it doesn't account for human nature. It basically assumes that people are not greedy, which I think everyone is greedy to a certain extent, and also it underestimates the power of people to end up controlling, like a few people ended up controlling everything. That generally hierarchies emerge no matter what system that you try to put in place. This is just the way we are.
So I'm hearing that you think that even though like communist or socialist systems might sound good on paper, that they don't account for certain aspects of human nature, like greediness, and that um, hierarchies tend to emerge kind of no matter what, and that it can end up with just a few people kind of ruling the day
Yes.
or the year or the century or whatever it may be.
And I feel heard. And I also think that if you set up a collectivist system, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, because if 98% of the population has this like collective mindset, the 2% that's going to naturally emerge to want to control everything is going to have an easier time to control everyone, because everyone is been programmed into this collectivist. They're less individualist.
So you're seeing that there can be a recipe for disaster with collectivist systems, because even if 98% of the society, for whatever reason, is kind of operating on a more collectivist level, that if there's 2% that are more individualist, then they can take advantage of everyone else's collectivism to basically be rulers.
Yeah. So I feel hard. I think more individualist focus in the culture creates more natural dissent, and it's harder and it creates more barriers for people to consolidate power, because people are naturally individualist, even though you can control people with their own egos, so to speak, but it's not nearly as easy to consolidate power in that environment than with a collectivist, we're all one, we're all in this together type mindset.
So, you think that sort of socially valuing a more individualistic approach like creates barriers to power being too consolidated in the hands of just one or a few people. And that even if some people become really greedy within like an individualist culture, it's still like they can't take advantage of it on the same level, I think is what you're saying, as in a collectivist.
That's essentially what I'm saying. And the thing about collectives is another thing about life and this nature and human nature. I don't think there's no such thing as equality. We're not equal. We're all different. We all have strengths and weaknesses. You know, and I'm not the most intelligent person in the world. You know, but you know, sometimes I think intelligence is overrated. You know, sometimes common sense is more practical. But we're not equals, so how can we work as equals, so to speak? So I don't know. It's complicated. It's hard for me to, but I feel like that element is ignored when people talk about collectivism. I think we all should have a say in things, so to speak. But some ideas are better than others, and some people are better at making better ideas than others. That's what I'm observed.
So another issue that you're concerned about with collectivism is that it doesn't seem to you like everyone actually is equal in terms of people have different aptitudes and abilities, intelligence levels, and that for that reason, it seems like we're not, if everyone has like an equal say or something, that we might not actually make the best decisions.
Essentially, you know, it's complicated. I can get into it more, but my time is up. Thanks for listening.
Did you say your time is up? Okay. Okay. I think I'll speak back to you, David, actually.
Okay. That's cool. But I'm going to try to keep it in a healthy rotation after me. So we'll just do.
Yeah.
I'll go to Evan next.
It's like the reverse card in Uno.
Yeah.
There's a thought I kind of lost track of. I want to say that I agree with the idea that we somehow need to kind of check each other. Like humans have some tendencies to, yeah, we have the capacity to be selfish or just lack consideration for others in some way. And that it's helpful to have some sort of practices or system in place that we can kind of keep each other in check in that way. I'll pause there.
You'd like to acknowledge that people do sometimes are selfish and get ahead of themselves, so to speak, and that it's good to have a system of checks and balances to keep people in line, so to speak. I know it sounds bad.
Yeah. Also, though, the idea of we're all in it together, I don't see any way where that's not true. Like, as far as I can tell, everybody living here, you know, to various degrees on the planet, in my town, whatever level you think of, we are affecting each other. And so I can't disregard what seems to me like the reality that we are in it together.
Okay, so you'd like to emphasize that you don't see any downside of people looking at things like we're in it all together because that is the reality.
Yeah, it feels just very obvious to me, but you know, I guess it's like that's kind of the throwing the baby out with the bathwater again thing. That just because there are, I guess, how some ways that people can maybe manipulate or take advantage of, I guess, collectivism, or like the idea that we're all in it together, doesn't mean that we're not in it together. Like, we're still here together, like breathing the same air, drinking the same water that flows throughout the entire planet. Like, we're all affecting each other, and pretending like we don't seems like it also has caused just huge problems.
Okay, you would like to say that even though in some cases people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, because you acknowledge there are people who take advantage of collectivist systems, but it does not negate the fact that we are in this together essentially, and to deny that has obvious problems.
Yeah. And I think I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I think what do I want to say? I don't know. I'm torn because I think that one thing that can help okay, I want to find some way to integrate addressing problems at a collective level while also having individual empowerment. And I think I'm a little stuck because I have ideas about how to do that, and I've seen some of them work sometimes. And I also know that people have a lot of frustrations with them. For example, both Evan and Karolina, I'll just say both Evan and Karolina talked about group decision-making processes that felt really inefficient or didn't work somehow. I guess I'll stop there.
Okay, you started out by saying that you would like to have a process that addresses issues collectively, but on the same note, empowers people on an individual level, and that you said that you have ideas on how to do that, and you've acknowledged some things that Evan and Carolina, or Edwin and Carolina, or was it Evan, or you definitely acknowledged something Carolina said about problems with collective decision making skills. I mean, decision making tactics, and that you got some ideas on better ways of doing that.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say one last thing that I don't know about on a national level, but at least on a small scale group level, a lot of people critique things like consensus for being inefficient and slow, but that I think a lot of that has more to do with the learning curve. And that once we learn decision-making processes like that, like if we learn it really well, that it can be a lot faster and efficient.
Okay,
And I've experienced that sometimes.
You said that people tend to not have a very good view of like the idea of consensus. I think the real problem lies in a learning curve of decision making skills, and that if more people had that, then the idea of phenomenon of consensus would be better.
I think so. I yeah. Thank you.
So is it my turn or are you? All right, so I'm gonna go to Evan. Try to keep this rotation going. Um, see here. The thing is, with working with a group, you have to kind of come to a consensus, so to speak, of what's important and what's not, and what is the group's problem and what's not.
So with groups, you have to come to a consensus of what's important and what's not.
Okay. I think a lot of friction or a lot of the division comes from like what the right feels like is the group responsibility and what the left feels like is the group's responsibility. And at the heart of that is, I think, is the debate on what is a right and what is a commodity.
So you're saying a lot of the friction between the right and the left comes from the difference of opinion in what is the group's responsibility, and the difference of opinion over what is a right and what is a commodity.
Yes. Like I think for me personally, I have common right-leaning issues of what the left considers a right. Um, I understand the spirit behind it, but I think it's wrong-headed. For example, like healthcare is a right. Um, I think healthcare is a commodity because that requires a service and doctors. If it's a right, then it means you can force someone to serve you, and someone who spent a long time getting a medical degree, and you're forcing their time and effort to serve you, even if you don't have the funds to pay them, so to speak.
Yeah, so you're saying that you think the left is coming at this at the wrong angle because they're saying healthcare is a right. You're saying it's clearly a commodity because it requires a service from other people, and that you can't enforce it without, having someone who actually took the time to get a medical degree to service, to perform a service on you.
Yes. I mean, a lot of people who probably don't get to know a lot of right-wing leaning folks might assume that we're all selfish for this, but I think it's more of a pragmatic view, and that a lot of conservatives do actually give a lot of money to charity. We don't mind charity. We just don't want to be forced into charity, because charity usually has strings attached, and it's just, and there's not a government involved. It's not forced. It's doing something that people feel is obvious good. And it can, I think charities can avoid fraud a lot better than government institutions.
Okay, so you're saying conservatives don't mind giving, it's just you prefer it in the form of a charity, because it's less likely to have corruption or maybe other problems than the government.
Choose what direction it goes in. It's your money. I think if you have money and if you've worked for it, you should. One of the advantages of working and getting money is you choose where it goes. It's part of the power you get. Part of the power you get from money, and the government just takes it away. You don't get a choice in the matter.
Right, so it's really the part where you get to choose. That seems to be the essence there. You get to choose what to do with your money.
And I think in a society, you're going to have more productive members and more less productive members. And it seems like, for me, I mean, I've seen people are actually struggling. They use the welfare system the way it's supposed to be used and don't stay on it, you know, as long as some other people, whenever they feel opportunity, they gain the opportunity to get gainful employment. But there's also, I mean, I think collectivist systems breeds a lot of a parasitic mentality of people who are like, since, you know, we're all in this together, so to speak, everyone gets to share, my issues, and I don't have to work as hard because other people are going to take care of it. And I don't think it breeds very strong, efficient people, for lack of a better word.
So you're saying how some people who use welfare appropriately, and then there are other people who don't, and you feel like that the availability kind of breeds this parasitic mindset of not having to work.
Yeah. I mean, I've dealt a lot with this, like working at a grocery store, for instance. We'd get the worst customers were the people who come in at first of the month. They're just really entitled and lacked a lot of social skills because they haven't had to deal with society like I had to do every day. And they weren't very gracious at the help they've been received. They felt like it was just owed to them, even though they did nothing to get it. And it was very annoying, especially since I had to do what they said. And there's a lot of resentment that comes from that. People are not very graceful about it.
Yeah, so you feel like you had to deal with the brunt of it, where you're actually dealing with these people in person. They come in the first of the month to the grocery store where you worked, and they felt very entitled, and they didn't even appreciate the help that you gave them. So you kind of saw that mindset in person.
Yeah, and I think that's you can see that element, that nasty element of human nature, from the bottom to the top in collectivist systems. And I think, well, you have the whole saying, like, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, so to speak. It's trite but true, and I think it actually builds character. I think people value what they work to get.
Okay. Sorry, I laugh with that phrase sometimes. And okay, so you're saying how you see that, you can see that from the bottom to the top all the way, in every part of society, and you believe in that phrase, pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and it's trite but true, you're saying.
Yeah, and that I think people value what they work to get.
Okay, people value what they work to get.
Yes, it has more value. And I think I'll just send that there.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Well, that's great. There's a lot of interesting stuff that I want to respond to. I want to respond to that, and there was also something from Megan that Megan said. Oh yeah, about consensus. So I'll start. Oh, I have to select someone. Karolina.
Okay. Be merciful.
Will do. I'll try my best. So I haven't given up on consensus. And I really liked Megan's point that people need to learn how to do it.
So what I'm hearing, you say that you don't want to give up about consensus. You think it's important to find the consensus, and you like the idea that Megan said about the idea of learning and practicing kind of collectiveness.
Yeah, and consensus works really great between me and my girlfriend, for example, because we have the same, we learn the same needs-based approach.
So you say that you have kind of personal experience with a consensus, and you refer to the relationship between you and your partner that is based on the same kind of sense of needs. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think if consensus works when everyone cares about each other's needs.
So you think that consensus might work in a situation when every participant of collecting acting takes care about others.
Yeah, and that's the culture we're trying to build with these empathy circles.
And you believe that when we practice empathy dialogue, we actually do this trying to take care about others.
Yeah, but I think if we don't have that empathy across the board where people actually care about other people's needs, consensus is going to be what it is now, a never-ending battle between currently the left and the right.
I'm not sure what you exactly said, but you said that you want to kind of move this practice. I'm not sure, abroad?
No, I'm saying that without empathy first, we're still stuck in a never-ending battle between people fighting for what they want.
So you say that this empathy feature is very important. It's about taking care. It's about thinking about other side of the scene, political scene. And as long as we don't take care, and as long as we don't practice this kind of empathy, we are still right and left, and we can't find a consensus, as I'm understanding you.
Right. So I haven't given up. I just think we have a long way to go before consensus has a chance.
So you're saying that you don't giving up, you are not giving up, and you are ready to practice, and you understand that we have a very long way ahead to achieve the moment when we will find a consensus.
Yeah. And then I also want to respond to David's point about, just to summarize, pick yourself up by your own bootstraps.
So you also want to refer to what David said earlier, and yeah.
There's always some little pain that happens inside when I hear that phrase. I just don't like it. But at the same time, I want to respect it and respect that that is a big part of American culture in a lot of states.
So you're saying that you don't like this expression, but you kind of admit that this is a part of American culture. This is a very important kind of feature of American culture, idea that is implemented into American culture.
For some states.
Okay, for some states.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wish everyone. I guess the question that comes to my mind is, if you want to help, if you really do want to help, then why not make it a law together?
So you believe that instead of the idea that is in this expression, that is expressed by this saying, you prefer the idea of, if you want to help, why don't do that together? Collectively, I suppose.
Right. And if people are naturally greedy, then it makes sense to make it a law where, we pick up people at the bottom to make sure that everyone has a decent life.
I'm not sure. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. If people are greedy, then we need a law to make sure that we give money to people who need help.
So if we believe that greediness, being greedy is kind of main feature of our character, we would have a lot of money to kind of raise or let people grow from the bottom. Is it correct?
Not quite.
No.
I'm saying if people are greedy, then naturally they don't want to give money to help people.
Okay, so you say that if people, members of society, whatever, are naturally greedy, they will not gonna help those on the bottom of the society.
Yeah. And I also believe that people need to work to feel fulfilled.
You believe that people need to feel fulfilled?
That they need to work to feel fulfilled.
Work to feel fulfilled. That's interesting. Yeah, so people need to work to, well, I'm just repeating what you're saying right now.
That's fine. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you. So I suppose I choose Bill as a reflector. Is it correct?
Bill's fine. Yes.
Yeah. I want to come back to this idea of homogeneous collectivity. I'm truly against such understanding of collectivity or collective society. I believe, and this is important to understand, that I believe, that's kind of my belief, that Japan's society is not actually collective in the meaning in the way we understand collectiveness.
Okay. So you want to kind of redefine here, as we're talking about collectiveness, and specifically as we defined it as sort of the Japanese model, and that really the Japanese model is not really collective.
Yeah, I believe it's kind of based on homogeneous thinking, right, and kind of responsibility to my supervisor, and a very important thing as honor as a very important feature of this kind of relationship with my supervisor.
Okay. So you're saying that the Japanese version of collectivity is based on a rigid hierarchy where you are then showing honor or responsibility to your supervisor in a very rigid way.
Yeah. So I suppose we talk about collective acting or collective community in a little bit different way or different meaning. And I'm quite sure that this meaning requires variety and kind of pluralism. Collectiveness doesn't make sense if there is no variety, if there is unity or homogeneous thinking or kind of monolithic ideology. We don't need collectiveness. We just need autocratic society or dictatorship. This is not collectiveness.
So you want to separate the idea of collectiveness as being sort of a monolithic or authoritarian society, and that in your version of collectiveness, or something else, maybe that's not the best word, there is, variety is included, and mutual respect, and our differences. So we have to work, as I sort of understand it, to kind of paraphrase, work in harmony together, acknowledging our differences.
Yes, and this is how I understand this interdependence. If we want to act collectively, we do that because we are different, not because we are the same. If we would be kind of thinking clowns, we don't need collectiveness. This is very important.
Okay, so I don't know if I'll get it. Maybe you'll need to correct me until we get it. So basically, we just don't need a monolithic sort of ideology. What we need is a variety, and I mean, I'm kind of saying it again, so I don't know if I got your deeper point. So,
well, different way. Because we are different, because we have variety of viewpoints, we need collectiveness. It's kind of opposites upside down.
Got it. So because of our differences, we need collectivity. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like I'm confident in my job as a teacher, but as an auto mechanic, it's not. I need the auto mechanic, and what we need is rules. So when the teacher goes to the auto mechanic, business can be done harmoniously. Roughly.
Okay, you use the word harmoniously, but I suppose it means for you kind of finding consensus.
Finding consensus more than harmoniously.
Okay. I want.
Let's change.
I want to give you one more example of anarchistic community. There are anarchistic communities, probably the same phenomena happens in the United States, that live in some squats, I mean, abandoned properties.
Right.
And they have different rules. And I know the community that never votes, never ever.
Mm-hmm. So
okay.
I'm sorry. So you are familiar with what you call, anarchistic communities that are essentially just a group of people happen to be in the same area, like we would say homeless encampments here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is important, they never make voting. They never vote. If they have to make decisions, they discuss, they deliberate. As long as they need to find the moment where all agree, where they are all agree about solution, about the decision they make.
Okay.
As long as they don't have agreement, they discuss.
Okay. So they don't vote. In these communities, when they come together, they don't vote. They discuss until they kind of come to a consensus that all can agree with. If they get there, they act. If not, they discuss longer.
Yes, and this is very problematic because sometimes you have to make quick decisions. And when you never vote, which is kind of brilliant idea, it's very interesting because democracy is kind of majority forcing minority process. This is what democracy is. And it's kind of coercion. This anarchistic community tries to implement the idea not coercing anybody, but it has his flaws, which is time. And our civilization, when many people, there is this idea that time is money. Time is not money. Time is our life. To live together and making together decision, and we have to change this civilization into something completely different that will give us time for making collective acting real.
Okay, all right. So the problem with this consensus model of these is time. That sometimes you need to make decisions in a timely manner, and this doesn't allow it. So that's a drawback of that sort of discussion system. So you're thinking about what sort of constructs, what kind of society, and what sort of forms of communication would we need to kind of get the best out of consensus with also making something that would allow you to act if you needed to act in a timely way. And that you want to give people more time to consider things.
And what is, I know that time is up, so just one sentence. Sure. It's very important to change the economic and social system, the cultural, the civilization we live in. It causes us a lack of ability to discuss and make rational decisions.
Okay.
And until we don't deal with our civilization, our economic culture, we don't resolve the problem. That's what I believe.
Okay. So there are many deep-seated biases and misconceptions we have in our society that prevent us from making a more rational, effective society. And so we need some basic changes in economics and other things in order that people then reach a state where they can make better decisions.
Yeah, I can say that I'm close to be heard, let's say.
Okay, all right. All right.
Speaking of time, we're at pretty much 11:45. So how do you guys want to do this part? You want to maybe try to give someone another round, or go into feedback?
I'm fine with whatever people want to do.
Since there's just one group of us, we probably have time for one more round, or like one more person take a turn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, sure. It was my turn, but if somebody wants to go, then Megan, did you have something you want to say?
I do actually. Speak to you.
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to talk about like this idea of welfare and parasitism. There's a couple of things. One is that I don't think, it's not good to have a single story. It's not good to have a single story about all people on welfare or who receive some sort of social benefits or social security are the same. Like they're all parasites, or they're all hardworking people who just need a temporary help hand up or whatever. Like we're talking about lots of people with lots of different personalities and circumstances. And so, but I do want to say that hard work does not mean that you will be safe, or that you will have your needs met in society. Like things are not like, I've seen this with my mom, for example, has worked fucking hard in her life and she has never had anything. And there's complicated reasons for that I don't have time to go into here. But yeah, hard work does not, there's this quote that's one of my favorite quotes from some political writer that's like, if hard work and enterprise made one a millionaire, or if wealth was the inevitable result of hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa would be a millionaire.
Okay. All right. So there's several things to unpack there. The first thing is that you don't believe the characterization of welfare recipients as either being all parasites or just down on their luck. There needs to be a more nuanced and varied view. We're a mixed bag. And then the other major point you had is that is sort of like the what you believe to be a myth is that if you just work hard enough and put in effort, that you'll be able to create security for yourself. And your example was your mother. And then also a political writer who said, if just hard work and was just enough to make you rich, then all the women in Africa would be millionaires.
Yeah, and sort of the other side of that is that there are people with lots of resources in this world who don't do anything, like specifically who are, I would say, parasitic. And one example of this, like not even going into, just putting aside people who maybe start companies or start a business, but like people who inherit money. Like there are so many trust fund kids in this world that, I mean, if we want to talk about parasitism, I think there are a lot of kids who, have like rich parents who they're not contributing anything to society, and they're not learning to work hard and appreciate what they have. And that is on such a bigger scale. We're talking about people who are inheriting thousands and millions of dollars, not people who get a couple $100 a month to scrape by.
Okay. So you were making in talking about parasitism. You were talking about the fact that there are a lot of rich people who, specifically trust fund babies, or who inherit money, who aren't really doing anything, and they are much more parasitic on the society as a whole than the welfare recipient who's getting a couple $100 and using it for food and things.
Yeah, and just specifically, when I'm not like, I would have to brush up on my history about this, but I remember learning something about that the people who kind of founded the United States, one of the things that's not always talked about, one of the things that they were trying to do was to get rid of the nobility that existed in Europe. And I believe that at one point, there was an extremely high tax rate on inheritance money, because inheritance money is basically how you create nobility. If resources just keep getting passed down from generation to generation, that's what nobles are. And that has gotten completely lost. And we have nobility in the United States now. We just don't call it that.
Right. So you were saying that you weren't quite sure of your sourcing, but that early on in our history, our forefathers, the founding fathers, wanted to make sure they taxed the nobility or the rich at a very high rate so that they would not create a noble class. But yet that is what we have created in the United States at this particular time.
Yeah. So thanks for reflecting that.
Okay, great. All right.
So I'm going to stop the recording and restart it for the outro, or the, what do you call it when you end something? It's not the prologue, it's the epilogue maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
Sure.